Do you remember the African-American side dishes only your grandparents knew? These dishes filled Sunday tables with love, stories, and the kind of flavor that came from patience, not recipes. What happens to our history when the taste of it starts to fade away? Collard greens with smoked turkey necks were a bowl of patience and pride. You could smell them before you saw them, simmering for hours in a big pot on the back of the stove. The greens softened slowly, soaking up every bit of smoky flavor from the turkey necks that bubbled alongside them. Families cooked these on Sundays or holidays, when time moved slow and home felt full. The sound of that gentle boil was the sound of tradition itself. Every kitchen had its own rhythm. Some added crushed red pepper, others a spoon of vinegar. But the goal was always the same: greens tender enough to melt and savory enough to make you close your eyes with the first bite. These weren't fancy greens. They were greens that told a story about making do, about flavor born from scraps and heart. When meat was scarce, turkey necks gave depth without waste, and those who knew how to use them never went hungry. The pot was often shared with neighbors or set aside for someone who could use a meal. In that way, it wasn't just food, it was an act of love, an unspoken understanding passed from one kitchen to another. That's what made collard greens sacred, not the recipe, but the care behind it. Candied yams with brown sugar and butter were the sunshine of the dinner table. They glistened under the oven light, sweet enough to make children hover close and adults sneak a second spoonful. The yams were sliced thick, bathed in melted butter, brown sugar, and a touch of cinnamon, then baked until the edges caramelized and the syrup turned glossy. It was dessert disguised as a side dish, a holiday tradition that showed up even when times were lean. Sweet potatoes were easy to grow, affordable, and rich in comfort, making them a Southern staple long before store-bought sweets came along. Families treated them like a celebration of resourcefulness, how something grown in the ground could taste like grace itself. On Christmas morning or after church on Sunday, that first bite always tasted like home. No matter who made them, the smell was unmistakable, warm, rich, and heavy with memory. For grandparents, this dish was proof that sweetness could still be found in hard times, and for everyone who came after, it became a symbol of continuity. The taste lingered long after the plates were cleared, a quiet reminder that joy, like brown sugar, can rise out of the simplest things. Fried cabbage with onions and bacon grease was one of those meals that made noise before it ever hit your plate. The sizzle in the skillet, the hiss of onions hitting hot fat, and the earthy scent of cabbage frying slow. It was a song of its own. This dish didn't come from luxury, it came from wisdom, from knowing how to make something humble taste like plenty. Cabbage was cheap, easy to grow, and lasted through the seasons, but in the right hands it turned into comfort itself. A spoonful of leftover bacon grease added flavor you couldn't buy, and onions made it rich enough to fill a house with warmth. Grandparents knew this kind of food didn't need measuring cups or fancy timing. It was cooked by sound and smell, stirred until it looked right. Fried cabbage fed families after long days of work, served alongside cornbread or rice, and no one ever complained. Every bite carried a little smoke, a little salt, and a lot of history. It reminded people that survival had its own flavor, one built on making do and making it good. To this day, that first forkful still tastes like resilience dressed up in simplicity. Okra and tomatoes stew was the kind of dish that stretched a garden into a meal. The pot came alive with color, bright reds and deep greens bubbling together, thickened just enough to cling to rice or cornbread. Okra was the backbone, its silky texture giving body to every spoonful, while tomatoes brought the tang that tied everything together. Grandparents made it in the summer when gardens overflowed and nothing went to waste. If you had a little onion, a pinch of salt, and patience, you could feed everyone. The smell drifted through the house, a mix of earthiness and spice that promised something hearty on the table. It wasn't just about taste, it was about gratitude, about pulling something beautiful out of the soil and turning it into sustenance. In lean times, This stew could hold a family steady. Some added smoked sausage when they had it, others kept it purely from the garden. But the feeling it gave was always the same: full, content, cared for. It's a dish that proves comfort doesn't need money, just memory. Hoppin John was the heartbeat of New Year's morning and every day that needed a little hope. Black-eyed peas simmered with rice, and a hint of smoked meat turned into more than just a meal. It became a blessing. Grandparents swore by it, saying a bowl on the first day of the year would bring luck, health, and enough to last. The peas symbolized coins, the rice meant abundance, and every spoonful felt like a promise whispered between generations. You could smell the onions frying before the pot even started, the kind of smell that felt like homecoming. This dish came out of history, from the low-country kitchens of the South, and found its way into hearts across America. Even when times were thin, Hoppin John stayed thick, filling bellies and spirits alike. It wasn't a rich person's dish. It was the people's dish, one that carried laughter, prayer, and endurance in equal measure. Today, even if you only make it once a year, you can feel that same wish for good fortune echo through every bite. Cornbread dressing was the kind of side dish that never stayed on the side. It was the soul of Sunday dinners and holiday tables, baked golden and rich with sage, onions, and broth. Grandparents made it from scratch, crumbling day-old cornbread by hand and stirring in whatever they had, sometimes bits of chicken, sometimes just love. The smell alone could make you stop mid-step and breathe it in. It was dense yet soft, buttery but never heavy, and it always seemed to stretch just far enough to feed one more plate. In a time when nothing was wasted, this dish was how people turned leftovers into luxury. Every scoop came with the memory of crowded kitchens and laughter spilling from one room to the next. It was more than food. It was ceremony, care, and continuity baked into one pan. Cornbread dressing held families together long before anyone called it tradition. Butter beans with ham hocks were patience in a pot. They cooked low and slow, bubbling gently until the beans turned creamy and the meat fell apart just right. The smell filled the house for hours, calling everyone to the table before dinner was even served. This was the kind of food that made you feel grounded, simple ingredients doing extraordinary work. Ham hocks added that deep, smoky undertone that wrapped around the beans like a hug. Grandparents didn't need recipes for this. They learned from watching, tasting, and trusting the process. The beans were washed, the hocks browned, and everything left to do its quiet magic. By the time the lid lifted, the air was thick with flavor and memory. These beans weren't fast food. They were food that taught patience, generosity, and pride in a full pot shared with others. Every spoonful carried a story, slow-cooked and soulful. Stewed okra and corn was summer's promise kept alive in a bowl. Bright yellow kernels and tender green okra met in a bubbling pan with a touch of butter and black pepper. It didn't look fancy, but one bite told you everything about family gardens, hot days, and cool kitchens. Grandparents knew how to make this taste like something special without spending a dime. It was one of those dishes that balanced sweetness and earthiness perfectly, the corn melting into the okra softening just enough to hold it together. It went with everything, from fried fish to biscuits, but it could also stand alone when the pantry ran thin. Kids who grew up on it remember the crackle of the pan and the smell that meant dinner was near. It's a dish that lives in the quiet corners of memory, humble and honest. Fried green tomatoes were the kind of treat that made ordinary days feel like celebration. Slices of firm, unripe tomatoes were dipped in cornmeal, sizzled golden in hot oil, and served crisp enough to crunch between your teeth. The first bite was always a surprise, tart, salty, and satisfying. Grandparents made them when gardens overflowed and nothing could go to waste. It was a dish born out of resourcefulness and love, not recipes. The oil popped and spat as they cooked, filling the kitchen with a smell that pulled everyone closer. You'd find them on the side of breakfast plates or stacked in sandwiches, proof that creativity always finds a way to feed you. Even today, their tangy bite feels like a small rebellion against blandness, a reminder that the best things in life are fried just right. Turnip greens with salt pork had a depth of flavor only time and care could create. The greens simmered slowly until tender, flavored by chunks of salt pork that gave off a richness no seasoning could match. Grandparents made them in big pots, stirring occasionally, tasting often, and trusting their instincts. The broth that gathered at the bottom, the potlikker, was gold. It was sopped up with cornbread, never wasted, because that's where all the goodness lived. This dish told a story of endurance, of families who turned scarcity into flavor and routine into ritual. Every pot was a reminder of resilience passed down generation by generation. Even now, a forkful of those greens tastes like history, salty, smoky, soulful, and true. Sweet corn pudding was the kind of side dish that made every plate feel special. It came out of the oven golden and trembling, soft like a custard and rich with the taste of summer corn. Grandparents made it when the fields were full and nothing went to waste. Fresh kernels were scraped straight off the cob, mixed with milk, butter, and eggs, then baked until the top browned just right. The smell filled the kitchen with a warmth that promised comfort. It was sweet, but not too sweet, the perfect partner for fried chicken or greens. Every spoonful melted on your tongue, reminding you that good food didn't need much, just care, patience, and a steady hand stirring the bowl. For families who grew their own crops, this dish was pride baked into every bite, a celebration of harvest and home. It carried a kind of nostalgia that tasted like Sunday dinner at Grandma's table. String beans and potatoes were proof that vegetables could be comfort food. The beans simmered low and slow in a pot with onions, black pepper, and leftover drippings from breakfast bacon. The potatoes softened just enough to soak up all that smoky flavor, turning a simple pot into something you could build a meal around. It was a dish that made use of what the land and the pantry offered, nothing more. Grandparents knew exactly how long to let it cook, long enough for the beans to fall apart, but not lose their soul. The smell filled every room, humble but heartwarming. Served with cornbread or rice, it felt like a small feast even on hard days. This wasn't fine dining, it was family dining, the kind that left you full and thankful. Black-eyed pea salad was the cool breeze of the dinner table. It started as a way to use up leftovers from the pot of peas cooked the night before, but it became its own tradition. The peas were chilled, mixed with onions, bell peppers, and a drizzle of vinegar, then left to marinate until every bite had a kick. It was light but filling, tangy but balanced, and always refreshing on hot summer days. Grandparents made it for picnics, church gatherings, or just to stretch food a little farther. Every spoonful was bright, flavorful, and full of texture. It reminded people that nothing needed to be wasted when creativity led the kitchen. That's how survival became flavor and thrift became art. It was more than a side. It was a lesson in making something beautiful from what you already had. Served cold from an enamel bowl or mason jar, it brought a spark of freshness to plates filled with rich meats and cornbread. The vinegar's bite cut through the heat, and the crisp vegetables gave it life. Kids didn't always understand how simple it was, they just knew it tasted good. But for the older hands who made it, it was about pride, discipline, and the joy of making abundance out of what others overlooked. Mustard greens with hot sauce were the bold cousin of collards. They had bite, both in taste and in spirit. The greens were boiled down until tender, then seasoned with salt, pepper, and sometimes a touch of smoked meat. A splash of hot sauce at the end turned the pot from ordinary to electric. It woke up the senses and cut through the heaviness of fried food like nothing else could. Grandparents loved the balance, the bitterness of the greens, the heat of the sauce, and the comfort of cornbread soaking up the broth. It was simple but defiant, food that stood tall in its flavor. Eating it felt like strength on a plate. The tang hit first, then the spice rolled in slow, leaving you warm and awake. It wasn't fancy cooking, it was honesty, fire, and tradition. The kind of dish that cleared sinuses and souls alike. Families gathered around bowls of mustard greens, laughing, sweating, and reaching for seconds. It was a shared experience, something rough, real, and necessary. When food was scarce, these greens reminded you that life still had bite, and so did you. Macaroni salad with egg and relish was the dish that showed up at every gathering. Cold, creamy, and a little tangy, it was made to be shared. The macaroni was boiled until soft, then mixed with chopped boiled eggs, sweet relish, and a spoonful of mayonnaise. A sprinkle of paprika on top gave it that perfect touch of pride. It was refreshing after a plate full of fried food and rich sides. Every family had their own version. Some added onions, others celery, but the feeling was always the same. Grandparents made it ahead of time so it could chill and let the flavors come together. It was comfort in a bowl, cool and familiar as an old song. The first taste was always soft and creamy, followed by that gentle pop of relish sweetness. It brought a balance to heavy meals and a pause between bites of heat and spice. Grandparents would stir it with quiet focus, knowing everyone expected it on the table. It wasn't just about the food, it was about showing care in the details, the small touches that turned gatherings into memories. Even now, that first spoonful can take you straight back to church basements, family reunions, and long summer evenings. Sweet potato souffle blurred the line between dinner and dessert. Fluffy, spiced, and baked until the top turned golden, it tasted like home, and holidays rolled into one. The mashed sweet potatoes were mixed with milk, butter, and sugar, sometimes topped with pecans or toasted marshmallows for good measure. The aroma alone could stop conversation mid-sentence. It was indulgent but humble, proof that the best dishes came from ordinary roots. Grandparents served it proudly, calling it a side but knowing it was the star. Every bite felt like warmth and family, soft enough to melt your worries for a moment. The sweetness didn't overpower. It wrapped around you gently, reminding everyone of better times and full tables. Even when money was tight, someone always found a way to make this dish. The souffle rose high in the oven, light as air but rich with memory. It stood for more than flavor. It was tradition baked into comfort, a little luxury in the midst of struggle. To this day, it remains the soul of Southern sweetness, as timeless as love itself. Field peas and rice were farm food at its finest. Whatever kind of peas you had, Crowder, cream, or black-eyed, they all found their way into this one-pot wonder. The peas simmered slowly in broth until tender, then were folded into a pot of rice that absorbed every drop of flavor. It was hearty, filling, and dependable. This was a meal built from the soil, flavored with what the day's work could offer. Grandparents cooked it on quiet evenings, sometimes adding onion or a scrap of ham hock if luck was kind. Each bowl carried the taste of the field and the pride of self-sufficiency. It was simplicity raised to the level of grace. What made it special wasn't just the ingredients but the rhythm of making it, the slow stir, the steam rising like a sigh after a long day in the sun. Children watched and learned how to season by instinct, not by measurement. The rice never went to waste, and the peas, humble as they were, became something sacred. It was food that filled more than your belly. It fed your dignity, your patience, your connection to the land itself. Fried corn with butter and sugar was sweet summer turned into a skillet miracle. Fresh corn was cut right off the cob, kernels scraping down with the sound of memory. A little butter, a spoon of sugar, and the heat of the pan transformed it into something creamy, golden, and rich. It wasn't dessert, but it could have fooled anyone. Grandparents made it to go alongside greens or fried meat, letting that sweetness balance out the salt. The caramel smell filled the house and made every meal feel like Sunday. It was a dish that captured joy in the simplest form. You could hear the hiss of the pan and know that something good was coming. Every family had their own way. Some added cream, some used lard, but all ended with the same rich comfort. The corn thickened as it cooked, turning into something between a side dish and a memory. Served hot and spooned straight from the skillet, it was sunshine you could taste, proof that happiness sometimes comes from nothing more than a cob, a little butter, and time. Baked lima beans were the quiet workhorses of the table. They were cooked in molasses or brown sugar, sometimes with bits of pork or onion, until thick and glossy. The beans came out tender and sweet, hearty enough to stand beside any main dish. It was thrifty food, affordable, filling, and satisfying. Grandparents made them for potlucks, picnics, or whenever they needed something to stretch the meal. Each spoonful carried that deep, comforting flavor that only slow cooking can give. It was a taste of patience and practicality, sweetened by love. The smell alone told stories, earthy, warm, and rich like a kitchen that never went cold. The molasses gave it body while the pork gave it soul, each batch simmering for hours until the flavors settled into harmony. Families ate it hot with bread or cold the next morning, never wasting a bite. In a time when food had to do more than fill you, baked lima beans did just that. They gave you warmth, strength, and the feeling that everything would be all right. Cabbage and ham skillet was the kind of dish that turned scraps into something worth gathering for. Leftover ham gave it salt and depth, while cabbage wilted perfectly into tender ribbons. A little butter or bacon grease tied everything together. Grandparents made it when money was tight, but pride stayed strong. It cooked fast, filled everyone up, and left the house smelling like warmth itself. The skillet crackled, the steam rose, and dinner was done. Simple food, strong flavor, and nothing wasted. That was the recipe for survival and comfort alike. The dish was living proof that creativity mattered more than wealth. Even the smallest piece of ham became a feast when paired with what came out of the garden. The cabbage softened but kept a gentle bite, and the smoky meat made it rich enough to feel like celebration. Families ate it straight from the pan, laughing, talking, grateful. In every household that knew struggle, cabbage and ham skillet was a quiet triumph, proof that resourcefulness could taste like victory. Okra fritters were the summer's way of saying thank you. When the garden overflowed with okra, grandparents turned the surplus into small, crispy fritters that snapped with every bite. The okra was sliced thin, mixed into cornmeal batter with a little onion, and dropped into hot oil until golden. What came out was pure magic, crunchy outside, soft and flavorful inside, with that hint of earthiness that only fresh okra could bring. These fritters were more than a snack. They were a symbol of making plenty from what you had too much of. The sizzling sound in the pan meant family would soon gather, waiting to grab a piece before they cooled. Kids would sneak them off the counter, dusted with salt, while grandparents pretended not to notice. Served hot with tomato relish or just plain, they turned a humble vegetable into something worth celebrating. Each bite was sunshine and soil and summer wrapped in cornmeal. Rice and gravy was the glue that held dinner together. Every family had their own way of making it, but the heart was always the same. A pan of drippings turned into something deep, brown, and rich. After frying chicken or pork chops, grandparents would pour in water or broth, scraping up every bit of flavor left behind. The smell alone could fill the whole house and make everyone's stomach growl. A pot of rice waited nearby, plain and patient, ready to soak up the gravy's soul. It was the perfect pairing, simple, comforting, and filling. There was something holy about it too, how scraps could be transformed into something that felt like a feast. You didn't need wealth for this dish, just skill, patience, and love. Every spoonful reminded families that nothing should be wasted, not flavor, not effort, not gratitude. Cornbread with cracklings was cornbread with attitude. Grandparents made it in heavy cast-iron pans, folding crisp bits of fried pork fat right into the batter. When it baked, the cracklings added a salty crunch that made each bite a little surprise. The edges came out brown and crisp, the inside soft and rich. It was a meal on its own, served hot with butter or a drizzle of honey for contrast. You could hear the crunch from across the table and know someone just got a good piece. This dish wasn't fancy, but it felt proud, born from thrift and ingenuity. Pork trimmings weren't scraps, they were treasures. Every crumb told a story about how nothing ever went to waste, and every bite carried the sound of a kitchen alive with laughter, heat, and care. When the pan came out of the oven, that golden crust meant comfort had arrived. Kids would hover close, waiting for the first slice. The smell of pork and cornmeal mixed with memories of long days and simple joys. It was food that didn't pretend, it just was. Honest, hearty, and homegrown. pickled beets added color and spirit to the dinner table. Deep red, sweet, and tangy, they glistened in mason jars lined up on shelves like jewels. Grandparents canned them in the summer to keep through winter when gardens slept and fresh produce was hard to find. Vinegar, sugar, and a few spices were all it took to turn simple beets into something special. They paired beautifully with rich meats, cutting through grease and heaviness with a sharp, refreshing bite. The first taste was always a shock, sweet and sour dancing together. Over time, it became something families craved, especially alongside cornbread or greens. The process was slow and careful, but that was part of its beauty. Each jar sealed a memory, a little bit of home saved for leaner days. You could always count on the sound of lids popping in late summer, proof that another batch was done. The deep magenta color stained fingers and hearts alike. These beets weren't just a side, they were tradition in glass, bright reminders that even in the quiet months, love still grew from what was once pulled from the dirt. Tomato okra gumbo, especially the meatless kind, was proof that flavor didn't depend on luxury. Thick, hearty, and spiced just right, it bubbled slowly on the stove while everyone's appetite grew. The tomatoes gave it tang, the okra thickness, and the onions and peppers built layers of warmth. Grandparents stirred it with wooden spoons, letting the smell fill the house. When times were lean, they skipped the meat and leaned on the earth instead. The gumbo still tasted rich, full of comfort and pride. It brought the whole family together, bowls steaming, spoons clinking, hearts full. Meatless or not, it was nourishment that ran deep, soul food born from resilience. The broth shimmered like sunset, and the vegetables soaked up every bit of spice and patience. Served over rice or with cornbread on the side, it made a meal that filled more than hunger. It fed the spirit. This was food that told the truth. You don't need plenty to make something worth remembering. Mashed rutabagas didn't get the fame they deserved, but they were loved all the same. This humble root vegetable had a flavor somewhere between turnip and potato, earthy and sweet. Peeled, boiled, and mashed smooth with butter, salt, and pepper, it became something soft and golden. Grandparents often made it in the colder months when gardens went quiet. It was affordable, filling, and nourishing, the kind of side that kept bellies warm and spirits steady. The taste carried a whisper of the Old South, of family farms and open kitchens. It wasn't fancy or fast, but it was honest. And that was what mattered. The smell of boiling rutabagas filled the room, humble yet comforting. Sometimes they were mixed with carrots for color or served beside roasted meats. Their sweetness deepened the longer they simmered, turning simplicity into something almost elegant. It was the taste of endurance, a reminder that quiet dishes can speak volumes. Fried apples with cinnamon were the smell of autumn mornings. Apples were peeled, sliced, and tossed into a skillet with butter, sugar, and a heavy shake of spice. They softened slowly, turning syrupy and tender, their edges caramelized to perfection. Grandparents served them with biscuits or beside pork chops, sweet meeting savory in the best possible way. The aroma could fill a house, warm and golden like sunlight through old curtains. It was dessert for breakfast, comfort for supper, and joy any time in between. No matter the meal, fried apples made the day a little softer. The sizzle of butter meeting sugar was a sound that could stop a whole room. You could almost taste the air before the first bite, rich, cozy, and familiar. Grandparents didn't need fancy ingredients, just the rhythm of the skillet and the memory of what worked. They stirred with patience, testing the apples until they melted just right. Served in old bowls or cast iron pans, they brought sweetness to even the leanest of times. It was love disguised as a side dish, and nobody ever said no to seconds. Rice and peas with onion and bacon brought soul to simple food. The rice simmered gently in broth while peas soaked up the smoky flavor of bacon grease. Onions melted into the mix, sweetening as they cooked. It was a weekday meal that didn't feel ordinary, filling, fragrant, and balanced just right. Grandparents made it when they wanted something hearty but easy, and the taste carried the memory of long days and family tables. It was the kind of food that didn't ask for praise but earned it anyway. A bowl that made you slow down and breathe in the comfort of home. The bacon gave it a deep saltiness that lingered, while the rice stayed fluffy and warm. You could eat it by itself or alongside anything and never leave the table hungry. It was the taste of resourcefulness, the proof that even simple ingredients could shine. Each bite felt like gratitude, a reminder that love and flavor could come from the same pot. Scalloped potatoes with cheese and onion were the showstopper of every potluck. Thinly sliced potatoes layered with onions and cheese, baked until the top bubbled golden brown. The smell alone could draw neighbors in. Grandparents knew how to make it rich but never wasteful, stretching cheese just enough, using every bit of onion. It was creamy, savory, and satisfying, each spoonful a small miracle. When you cut into it, steam rose up like applause. The crust on top was everyone's favorite, crisp and full of flavor. It was comfort food in its purest form, the kind that left no leftovers. Every bite carried the warmth of home ovens and the laughter of Sunday dinners. The cheese clung to the potatoes like a promise, melting just enough to make you close your eyes and smile. Even the simplest ingredients, milk, butter, salt, found harmony here. Families shared it proudly, not as luxury, but as proof that care turned scarcity into abundance. Corn fritters with syrup turned breakfast into a celebration. Fresh corn was mixed with flour, eggs, and milk, then fried until puffy and golden. The outside crisped beautifully, while the inside stayed soft and sweet. Grandparents stacked them high, sometimes drizzling syrup or honey over the top. You could eat them for breakfast, lunch, or supper. It didn't matter. They tasted like warmth, laughter, and mornings that started early and ended proud. The smell of corn and syrup filled the air, simple but unforgettable. Every bite carried the taste of tradition, proof that sweetness didn't have to be complicated. The batter sizzled as it hit the pan, the edges curling into golden halos. Sometimes a touch of vanilla or cinnamon was added, making them almost dessert-like. Kids waited impatiently, hands ready, eyes wide. Grandparents cooked batch after batch, smiling quietly as plates emptied faster than they could fry. It was joy in motion, made from what the earth gave and love turned golden. Collard green Potlikker soup was proof that nothing in the kitchen went to waste. After collard greens were boiled with ham hocks or smoked meat, the leftover broth was packed with nutrients and flavor. Families would save it, thicken it with beans, rice, or cornbread crumbs, and serve it as a soup. It turned what could have been discarded liquid into a meal that could stretch for days. Potlikker was praised for its richness and vitamins, especially during times when fresh vegetables were limited. Black families in the South cherished it as part of their food culture, a reminder that even scraps held value. The taste of Potlikker soup was smoky, salty, and comforting, carrying both sustenance and heritage in every bowl. It reminded people that resourcefulness was a form of survival and strength. For many households, it was a dish that fed both body and spirit when times were most difficult. Pokeweed greens offered one of the first fresh tastes of spring for people living with few supplies after a long winter. Young pokeweed shoots emerged early and plentifully, but they carried natural toxins that required careful boiling in several changes of water. Enslaved cooks, drawing on African knowledge of wild plants, mastered this technique to create a tender, spinach-like dish that supplied vital vitamins when gardens were only beginning to grow. Seasoned with a bit of salt pork or a sprinkle of wild herbs, poke greens became a welcome sign of the changing season. Long after emancipation, poke salad festivals in Appalachia and the Deep South celebrated this once humble plant, turning a survival ingredient into a community tradition. The careful preparation taught by generations of African American cooks is still followed today, preserving both safety and flavor. Pokeweed greens remind us that deep botanical knowledge and patient cooking transformed a potentially dangerous weed into nourishing food that helped sustain families through the hardest times. Mustard greens with smoked turkey necks carried the flavor of endurance from one generation to the next. During the Great Depression and later years when ham hocks became expensive or scarce, cooks turned to the neck bones of smoked turkey for the same rich depth. The greens simmered slowly in seasoned broth until tender, soaking up the smoky essence of the meat and the spice of crushed red pepper. Families gathered around the pot to breathe in the savory aroma while cornbread baked in the oven. This dish offered nourishment and warmth, proof that ingenuity could turn modest ingredients into a feast. Children learned to wash and tear the greens while elders seasoned by taste alone, passing down a craft more than a recipe. Today, pre-washed greens and quick cooking methods have dulled the ritual, but the memory of long simmering pots and the steady comfort of smoked turkey necks remains a powerful reminder of resilience and shared meals. Rice and molasses supper was one of the simplest meals, but also one of the most remembered. A pot of rice was inexpensive, filling, and always on hand, but paired with a drizzle of molasses, it turned into something sweet and sustaining. Sugar was too costly for everyday use, but molasses was affordable and sold in larger tins that seemed to last forever. Families poured it over steaming bowls of rice, letting the dark syrup seep into the grains until they gleamed. The taste was rich, almost smoky, with just enough sweetness to make children smile. It was often eaten at the end of the day when no meat could be spared, and it carried people through the night with enough strength to face the next morning. My grandmother told me rice and molasses was a treat disguised as necessity, proof that resourcefulness could soften the edge of scarcity. In the 1960s, when Black families were stretching every dollar, rice and molasses kept hunger at bay while still offering a touch of comfort. Simple, cheap, and unforgettable, it was a meal born of need but remembered with love. Hoghead cheese was a triumph of resourcefulness, transforming every part of the animal into a dish of surprising elegance. After a hog was butchered, the head was simmered slowly with onions, herbs, and spices until the meat fell from the bone. The rich broth was strained and cooled, setting into a savory jelly that held tender shreds of meat and subtle seasoning. Sliced and served cold with crackers or bread, it became a delicacy at gatherings where nothing was wasted and flavor was celebrated. Making it required patience and skill, with families sharing techniques that varied from one household to the next. Children watched the slow process with a mix of curiosity and awe, learning that thrift could create unexpected pleasures. Today, few people undertake the labor of hoghead cheese, and store-bought versions lack the character of the homemade original, but its history endures as a testament to resilience and the deep respect African American cooks held for every gift the animal provided. Maypop fruit mash turned the wild passion fruit of the American South into a rare dessert filled with tropical fragrance. Known as Maypop for the sound of its hollow fruit when stepped on, this native vine produced aromatic yellow fruits that ripened in late summer. Enslaved foragers gathered the fruit, split the rinds, and scooped the bright pulp into a bowl with a drizzle of molasses or honey when such sweeteners were at hand. The result was a naturally tangy treat that needed no cooking and provided a burst of vitamins. The flavor, a cross between citrus and melon, delighted anyone lucky enough to taste it. Even after emancipation, rural families prized maypops for jellies and pies, and the plant remains a cherished wild edible across the Southeast. Maypop fruit mash preserves a memory of fleeting seasonal abundance and the creativity that transformed wild gifts into moments of celebration, proving that even in the harshest circumstances, people found ways to enjoy the bright, unique flavors offered freely by the natural world. Hog maw stew was a dish that took something most would discard and transformed it into a centerpiece for the table. Hog maw, the lining of a pig's stomach, was cleaned carefully, then stuffed with potatoes, onions, and spices before being simmered until tender. The result was hearty, filling, and deeply flavorful, stretching small amounts of ingredients into a meal that could feed an entire family. In times when money was scarce, hog maw stew allowed families to make use of what they had, proving that nothing from the animal went to waste. It was often served at gatherings where one pot had to go far, reminding everyone of the value of sharing and stretching food. The dish carried cultural roots tied to both survival and celebration, a reminder that even hard times could produce food that comforted and united. Hog maw stew was not fancy, but it represented ingenuity, thrift, and strength in the face of want. Smoked catfish tails reveal the skill and resourcefulness that defined survival cooking on plantations near rivers and coastal waters. After commercial fishermen or estate kitchens took the prime fillets, the bony tails and smaller pieces were often left behind. Enslaved cooks cleaned these scraps carefully, rubbed them with salt or local spices, and smoked them over slow hickory fires. The result was a flavorful preserved fish that kept for days and could be stirred into stews, crumbled over grains, or eaten on its own with cornbread. Smoking techniques reflected West African traditions carried across the Atlantic, where preserving fish with wood smoke had long been a way to ensure protein during lean seasons. In later years, African American fish camps and southern smokehouses continued this method, turning a food of necessity into a celebrated regional specialty. Modern smoked catfish dishes found in Mississippi and Louisiana restaurants still trace their flavor back to these early practices of careful preservation and culinary creativity born from scarcity. Red drink. Juneteenth punch flowed like a symbol of freedom and memory at community celebrations marking emancipation. Made from hibiscus petals or bright strawberries steeped into a deep crimson infusion, the drink stood for resilience and the blood of those who fought for liberation. Families would gather in churchyards and town squares, pouring the sweet, tangy liquid into simple cups while music and laughter filled the warm June air. Children chased each other between picnic tables as elders told the story of the first Juneteenth, reminding everyone of the hard-won joy behind the holiday. The punch often carried a gentle spice from cloves or ginger, offering a flavor both refreshing and layered, much like the history it honored. Preparing the drink was as important as drinking it, with women and men alike contributing fruit, sugar, and labor to the cause. Though some communities still keep the tradition alive, many younger generations have never tasted the vibrant red drink that once defined a day of remembrance and celebration. Pumpkin stew with onions was the kind of dish that proved homegrown vegetables could anchor a meal. Pumpkins were easy to plant, easy to store, and yielded enough flesh to keep a family fed for weeks. My grandmother peeled chunks of pumpkin, cooked them down with onions, and let the pot simmer until it turned thick and savory. The sweetness of the pumpkin mixed with the sharpness of onion, creating a balance that felt hearty and satisfying. Sometimes she added a little pepper or a leftover bone for extra flavor, but even plain, the stew was filling. Served with bread or cornbread, it was enough to feed a household without meat or costly ingredients. In the 1960s, pumpkins were not just for pies or holidays, they were staples, pulled from backyard gardens and turned into supper. The stew carried warmth, thrift, and creativity in every spoonful. Pumpkin stew with onions showed that survival did not mean going without taste, only learning to love what the land gave freely. Stewed okra and tomatoes were the kind of dish that took simple garden produce and turned it into something nourishing enough to feed a family. Okra, a vegetable with African origins, thrived in southern soil, while tomatoes grew easily in backyard gardens. Together, simmered slowly with onions, spices, and sometimes a scrap of salt pork, they created a stew that was tangy, savory, and thick. Families relied on it because it stretched small harvests into larger meals, often served over rice or with cornbread to make it filling. The dish was especially important when meat was too expensive to buy, as it added depth and nutrition without needing animal protein. Stewed okra and tomatoes became more than food. They were a way to survive with what the land provided. For many, the taste carried reminders of summer gardens and the hard work it took to keep families fed. It was frugal, delicious, and a perfect example of survival cooking. Bay leaf infusion offered warmth and gentle comfort, using one of the few aromatic plants that grew wild near plantation quarters. Fresh or dried bay leaves were gathered from native bay trees and steeped in hot water to create a soothing tea with a light floral scent and mild medicinal qualities. This infusion was believed to aid digestion and ease colds, and it provided a calming moment during hard days. The knowledge of bay's healing properties came from both African herbal traditions and local indigenous practices, merging into a shared understanding of the land's quiet gifts. Even after emancipation, African American communities continued to brew bay tea for health and hospitality, and its subtle fragrance remains a hallmark of Southern kitchens where bay leaves still flavor soups and stews. Bay leaf infusion stands as a gentle reminder that survival was not only about calories but also about care, showing how enslaved people drew strength and solace from the natural world around them. Comment your favorite side dish, like the video, and subscribe so the taste of our grandparents' kitchens keeps living on.